Mr. Brown ken ek al van 1994 af. Hy is 'n baie aangename persoon. Hy is 'n komplekse persoon wat jy moet leer om te verstaan.
When I arrived in Springfontein, it was difficult to cope in such a small place, but it was very difficult to make friends in a small place. And everybody was also very questioning, and nobody wanted to accept me for what I am. Everybody put a label on me.
Ja, ek is Frans Raad en ek het meneer Brown geken as 'n goeie vriend. En weens die feit dat hy goed onder ons breingemeenskappe voorgekom het nie, het ons verbintenis baie goed geweest.
Hy is 'n persoon wat uit 'n moeilike agtergrond kom. Hy het baie politieke woelinge in sy lewe gehad. Hy is deur die veiligheidspolisie aangehou.
Ag, daar was iets wat met hom gebeur het by die skool en dat hom probeer nou benadeel en gekyk of hulle nie kan van hom ontslaag raak omdat hy by ons kom bly het.
Hy was betrokke by die ontuchtwet, het hulle hom amper gearresteer.
In sy geval was dit nou heeltemal 'n nuwe ding. Hy is diskriminasie teenoor hom, omdat hy, weens die feit dat hy 'n breinvrou gehad het, die meeste mense in die dorp en hom nou dan nog nie gelyk nie as gevolg van dit.
Wie kan hy help in die groep? Niemand. Wanneer sal die kijken begin groei?
Hy het vir my verskriklik baie by die skool gedoen. Hy het uit sy pad uitgegaan om vir my by die skool te help. Hy het 'n tuin daar begin, omdat ek hom aangesê het om 'n tuin te begin. Ek het vir hom gesê, dat is baie nodig dat ons omgewingsvriendelike tuin begin. Hy het hom voluit daarin gewerk, en hy het daai tuin begin, en daai tuin het gefloreer.
I'm Mr. Brown. I am a teacher here at Williamsville Primary. I teach grades 5, 6 and 7 in the learning areas of natural science, technology, life orientation, and I also have with each class 2 periods of gardening per week. Prentemaat, jy kan dit in jou hoed of jou cap sit, dan mos mooi lyk dit.
Ja, meneer.
Maar nou hoe kry ons dit van hulle? Hierdie is dun, en sodra die slang begin opklim, dan val die slang af. Bevrugting van plaas wanneer 'n oofim met 'n sperm, wat is die woord wat ons daar moet gebruik? Oofim, maar baie? Oofim. Nou is dit sommer al die groepe. Ek het jou gesê ek sal een vra.
Hy het 'n baie lank pad geloop, hy's baie lank al in die onderwys. Hy's hier by die 40 jaar al in die onderwys. En hy het eintlik nog nie veel bereik nie.
Die neste sien, né? Al die neste. En dan hierso sal jy sien meneer het ander grassoorte geplant ook. Kan julle sien, die is nie dieselfde as hierdie nie, né? Right, kom die kant toe. Kyk die kant toe asseblief.
Ek voel dit was nie regverdig teenoor hom dat hy so min bereik het in die onderwys nie. En ek dink daar is baie gediskrimineer teen hom.
Having remained on post level 1 for 41 years is rather odd. It's very odd. And especially with my abilities. I mean, that I proved over and over by getting a National Teaching Award. But it seems to have meant nothing. I feel I've become a sacrificial lamb to them.
Regtig, hy is diep in sy hart seer gemaak en hy het ook 'n reg om ongelukkig te voel oor die behandeling. Want dit is nie aanvaarbaar.
My whole life was centered around teaching. And the anger that I have is the way the department has abused me and my abilities. Instead of using me and my abilities, they've abused that.
Wanneer die hen op eie sit sê ons sy is, broeis baie mooi.
They're not unaware of these things, but they don't care. They have their reasons, but I know that I was capable, and I know that I would still be capable. I would have still been teaching. I wouldn't have left 11 months early. But I just got upset with the whole deal, and I thought it's not worth it.
Een sperm, maar baie? Die sperm, help af. Goed. Wanneer op eie sit sê ons sy is,
Look, I taught in colored schools all my life, and most of my pupils had a great respect for me. Even now at this school, young grade 7 boy will be able to testify to what respect he has for me. And that tells me that I did make my mark, no matter what. Ek is in Port Elizabeth in 1943 gebore. My pa is oorlede toe ek 5 jaar oud was. Ek het toe saam met my ma getrek na my oupa en ouma in Aberdeen distrik. Hulle het 'n wolplaas daar gehad met die naam van Ludlow.
miskien sal ek hom nou kan raak van. Sy. Nou gaan ek die stuk laat droog raak. Sy. Hy is 'n bietjie swaar. Ja.
When my mother passed away, it was rather a sore point because despite what my brother perhaps believed, I loved her very much.
And at that stage, my sister and I had absolutely no clue where Alec was.
And when he phoned me to say that, I don't know where he got my telephone number, but he phoned me to say that she'd passed away and that she was being buried on the Saturday. I think it was an Easter weekend.
Alec did indicate at that stage that he would not have the money to come to the funeral, and we were quite prepared to pay for train fare, airfare, whichever way he would like to come.
I then tried to get conveyance. My car was broken down. I tried to borrow a car, tried to hire a car, but that was too expensive. I tried to fly, I tried to go by train. Everything was full. I couldn't get there.
He then apparently asked my sister if we could delay the funeral a week, which we were quite willing to do. But we couldn't go beyond that time period.
And his answer to me was, your mother doesn't want you at the funeral anyway. So I said, well, in that case, do me the favor, I'll pay you back, buy a red rose and just put it on a coffin. And he refused. Said my mother didn't want flowers at her funeral. It was hard, but there it is. So I don't even know where she's buried. I put the phone down and I never spoke to my brother again or my sister. Sorry for that.
And he just didn't come to the funeral.
My attendance at the funeral was refused. Why? Because I was a colored boetie, perhaps? I don't know. It was refused. Point blank.
My mom was buried at her own request with no flowers, bar my sister and I broke the rules, and we put a few red roses on her coffin from the three of us.
Can't you manage it? Maar die kou, as nie so ding soos Coetzee nie. I went to college against my mother's wishes. She said, you'll never get any money, you'll never be anything. And she wasn't wrong. She was right. But I felt from inside, there was something that was driving me. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit and look. I couldn't become a rich person at the expense of others. That was my one great thing. And I felt as a teacher I could impart what I had inside of me, what I'd got from her, what I'd got from my grandparents, what I'd got from my brother and sister. That was always part of my teaching, because that is what made me the person I am. It was only the things that I saw that I started to form some kind of vision for the future, because the treatment of black people especially was very bad. I couldn't believe it, because that was not what my grandparents had taught me. And so the rose glasses that I wore were shattered, and it hurt me very deeply. Nummer 7. My pa is oorlede toe ek 5 jaar oud was. Ek het toe saam met my ma getrek na my oupa en ouma in Aberdeen distrik. Hulle het 'n wolplaas daar gehad met die naam van Radlow. Ek het daar skool geloop en groot geraak. En daarvanaf is ek toe na kosskool in Graafrenet, Union High School. Toe gaan ons suidkus van Natal toe na Parkrenie. Ek het daar gebly in my matriekjaar. Daarna het ek werk gekry op die spoorweg op Ladysmith Natal. En ek het daar vir 2 jaar gewerk. Die eerste jaar as 'n klerk en die tweede jaar as 'n vakleerling communicasies. But this other gentleman, he worked with the African people, and they used to come to a small little window in the wall, while the whites had a long counter and were far less than the black people. And he used to swear at them, he used to spit in their faces. He used language that I don't even use today. You know, the type of language we would pick up on the street. And it didn't sit well with me because I wasn't brought up that way by my grandparents. Going to Port Elizabeth after so many years, just to see my sister and brother, I'm rather excited. And I hope that we will become more united as a family and closer together. In 1964, in January, I went to the training college in Graafrenet, and there I met up with Afrikaans speakers and English speakers, and I always somehow had the idea, because of the way I grew up, that the English speakers wouldn't be that apartheid-minded, and I found out that in some instances they were actually worse. Yeah, I hope that I'll be taken to see where my mother's grave is, and my father's for that matter, because I've never seen it. I was too young at that stage. And so at the end of my college career in 1967, I packed my bags and I went to Cape Town. And, but also on the advice of a very old man in Graafrenet, Mr. Meyer, a colored man. And he gave me a lot of tips, and he said to me, go and live in the colored areas because that is where you want to be. It was my aim to prove that if a white person stays in a colored area, because I couldn't go in a black area, I'd obviously be arrested straight away, that nothing would happen to me as a white. You know, they were so vicious in those days. They used to say, you'll degrade yourself, you'll become like them. And I didn't see them as other than myself. I'm hoping that the outcome of this journey will be closure on the whole saga with my mother having died without my being present. I don't know if I want to go there. I don't know if I should. She was a Muslim girl that I met in my last year of college. It worked in Port Elizabeth. And we had a relationship. But then my mother intervened. I don't think I want to go into that. Yeah, I don't think I want to go into that. Because I used to write her letters from college. And her aunt stole the letters and gave it to my mother. And there was hell to play about that. And I just think because of my mother, I wouldn't like to go into that part of it.
Why? So what you're saying is, I mean, this has certainly had an influence of what you are and who you became. So by ignoring that, is the saying, well...
Well, I'm not ignoring it, but I wouldn't like to put it in my story because, well, I'd like to, how would I omit my mother?
You're not omitting your mother's not here.
No, how would I omit my mother in the story? You follow?
Because that's part of the rift that came between you and your family. That's part of the breakdown of communication.
Give me a little while to think about it. In December 1965, I was in Port Elizabeth one evening, and OK Bazaars used to have, what would you call them? Father Christmas and various figures that used to move in their windows. And I was standing and looking at this, and then I don't know how it happened, but there was a colored lady there, and we just started talking. And she was very nice, a very pretty girl. And I said I'd like to see her again, and so we made an appointment. And I saw her again, and when I went back to college, I used to write to her. And she kept these letters, and of course, I suppose I fell in love. Some people say it was infatuation, but I don't think so. This is where my childhood home was, where I grew up with my grandparents, my brother and my sister in the late 1940s, early 50s. This was the front of the house. This was a stoep. The front door was somewhere here. On this corner of the house, there used to be a big elm tree standing here, and this is evidently the remains of the water tank that we used rainwater from. In the old stable there, I picked up this spoon. And more than likely, it was definitely a silver spoon at one stage. They used to make these spoons of brass and then silver plate them. Obviously, it came out of my grand's kitchen or out of the cutlery. Ja, ek dink baie my jeug daar was baie gelukkig. Ek dink enige kind is optimisties, en as ek my eie kind aankyk, hy het dieselfde manier in die lewe, alles is vir hom rooskleurig. Dit is wel so dat ek baie keer gedink het as my pa net gelewe het, sou dinge anders gewees het. The last time I was standing here was in 1961 in April, when we left for good, and I've never been back since.
My relationship with Alec, I don't think was ever really anything other than good. I mean, normal children's spats. That's mine, give it to me, that's mine, give it to me, you know. But there was no bitterness or hatred between us at all.
For all I know, I might have even had porridge with a spoon. I have no idea, but I'm sure it came out of her kitchen. Just sadness that it all had to pass.
What had to pass?
My days here and the farm itself, I mean, obviously, it's no longer got the character that it had, unfortunately. My earliest memories of my mother was, she was a caring person, and when she was still in Aberdeen working there while we were on the farm, she looked after us very well. But she was also strict like my grandmother.
It was a strict life. We were in that life we were strictly brought up, but it was a good life. There was plenty of love. There was no lack of any material things.
That was extremely good times. I don't think I'll ever have that happiness again in my life.
It's obvious I was a rebel, very much so, but not your normal teenage rebel. Something else was driving me, and I suppose my mother saw me as a rebel and didn't like it. I don't know. Well, she didn't like colored people. I mean, she was a racist.
At the time that this rift occurred, I don't think it affected me in any great sense, because at that stage I was busy building my own life, my own future with my wife. We had a young baby, and we were really wrapped up in our own thing, and never gave it a thought that this could be something that would perhaps last as long as it did.
Well, my mother was very angry. I don't know what my brother and sister thought. I don't know if they probably knew. I don't know. Maybe my mother told them. Every holiday when I used to come back to Uitenhage, my mother was staying in Uitenhage, and I used to go and see her. And then this one night I went out with her, and when I came back, my mother wanted to know her name. So I said, her name is Dija. Her name was Khadija, and I said, her name is Dija. She said, why Dija? So I said, well, did you ever see such a funny thing? I didn't want to tell her it was a lady of color, and then she called me to the bedroom and said that the aunt had given her the letters. And I think I must have cried in my mother's lap till 4 o'clock in the morning, and I realized that there was nothing doing.
In 1962, when I got married, he was the best man at my wedding. And then I saw him once or twice. He was teaching down in Cape Town at that stage. I saw him once and twice after that. And after he had moved into the coloured community, we saw him once more and then never saw him again.
So the point is the embarrassment that it would have caused my family. Would it be fair of me for them to go through that embarrassment? It wouldn't have been.
Well, what's an embarrassment? Don't you think if you communicate...
Those days, with apartheid as it was, it would have been very embarrassing for me to go to Uitenhage, to my mother's house with a coloured wife. And it was illegal at that stage. What do you think would have, the neighbours would have said? What do you think other people... I wasn't prepared to do things like that.
Dear Alec, a short letter to try and explain what I'm feeling about you, our meeting after all these years, and my not wanting to participate in your life story. I can remember talking to you about what you were doing and asking you to try and get some help. You were adamant that what you were doing was right, and only for you, I might say. I can't begin to explain the resentment that I feel towards you because of the heartache and the stress you caused Mom. There were years that she spent grieving the loss of you and fretting over you. Where were you? How were you? And what were you doing? Daily she heard the prayers from the mosque, and every time she was reminded of you and was sad all over again. You chose to distance yourself from us. In no way, to my knowledge, did we ever shun you. Did you not realize that the choices you made have affected all of us in many different ways? It just seemed to me that if Alec Brown was all right, then that was all that counted. I don't know how I feel about our relationship. We have a totally different outlook on life. I can be friendly and polite to you, but not much more.
sy lewe van 'n woestyn in 'n wildernis van pyn. Met visie maar verlore, alleen het hy gekwyn. Alleen, so ontsettend alleen.
And so I said to my mother, I'd like to at least bring closure to the effort, and could I go and see her one more time? So the next day I went through to where she works, picked her up and work, and when we got to the bottom of Russell Road, she climbed out of the car and said, "That's it, goodbye."
Die mense vra, wie's die man wat die titel dra? Hy's Mr. Brown.
So it was very difficult for me. And I felt very lonely after that. It was she that introduced me to the Muslim faith. And I thought perhaps there was the answers I'd been looking to, you know, the soul answers. But they were all wound up within the racial context of the day. And, you know, I mean, it was difficult to try and sort it out as a young guy without experience.
His decision not to come to the funeral left us very disappointed. We thought even though he and my mom had the sort of disagreement and hadn't seen each other for a while, we would still have liked him to have been there. I think she would have liked him to have been there, but he made the choice, as far as we know.
I think what I would like to do is to visit her grave, because I don't know where it is, and put that red rose there. And that would give me closure with my mother. But I would like to further the relationship between my brother and my sister as well. I first applied for my colored identity in 1967, towards the end of 67. In fact, every year after that, it was towards the end of the year. And I would receive a letter back from Internal Affairs that your mother was white, your father was white, you are white.
Maybe I could have been more diligent in trying to find him when he was lost, as it were. You know, and yet one feels so helpless because he has made a choice which you don't really know how to handle.
Why put them in trouble? Because I'm doing what is wrong in the contemporary South Africa, but what is actually morally correct and morally right. Because the government of the day didn't see it that way. I mean, obviously. So, I mean, this is something that I don't think Tizzy and David actually realize. I don't think they realize the extent to which apartheid really went, because their lives were cushioned. I went out into the raw field and I saw, and I felt, and I heard, and I experienced.
Do I resent my brother? Not at all. Not in the least. He made choices. I made choices. I might have made the choices he made had certain things been different in my life. What caused those choices that he made, I don't really know. But had they happened to me, who's to know? I might have made exactly the same choices that he did.
And 3 years after I bought the house, the department eventually squeezed me out of Cape Town. I couldn't get a post anyway. And then I found every colored regional office in the country, and eventually I got a post in Harrismith, Natal, in Harrismith, Free State. I was there for 3 months when the chief inspector moved me to Kroonstad. things were difficult. I mean, coloureds had to use the non-white entrances. Coloureds had to use non-white buses, and I followed suit. Very often I was thrown off the train or I was thrown off the bus because they felt I wasn't a coloured.
Die mense hier in Williamsville het dit moeilik gevind om hom te aanvaar. En hulle kon nie verstaan nie hoekom het die ou nou uit sy pad uit gegaan om na ons toe te kom. En ek het dit raak gesien. Ek sê, as hy na my toe kom as hy 'n broer en as hy waarheid het, as hy regverdig is, dan het ek iemand om 'n probleem aanvaar kom as my broer.
Die is nou aan haar tuis. Ek het tuis by hulle gegaan hier 1966, 67, 1996, 97, 98 in die huisie.
Dit was reg haglike omstandighede wat hy ingekom het. My dit aanvaar en geweet. Dit is nou nie soos wat hy voorheen gelewe het. Maar toe hy hier kom was dit reg haglik. Hy het nog gegaan soos iemand wat uit die huis trek en moet in 'n makoko gaan bly.
But unfortunately, that stigma of mine probably being white or probably being a little boer, somebody from nowhere, seemed to stick with me. And a large number of people had great respect for me, but others just ignored me and ignored my plight.
In sy lewe van 'n woestyn, in 'n wildernis van pyn, met visie maar verlore, alleen het hy gekwyn. Alleen, so ontsettend alleen, maalkop van gedagtes, verwyte vrese, vernietigende reën. Soos die mense vra, wie's die man wat die titel dra? Hy's Mr. Brown, sonder rus vir sy siel. Hy's Mr. Brown, straks staar hy in die spieël.
I'm just thinking how many years have passed and that I finally got here after so many years. I was not aware that she was cremated, and it was quite a shock to hear that the ashes were just spread on the outside. Just wish I was here when her ashes were spread on the grave. And wish that I could have seen the grave years ago. Nevertheless, my thoughts are with them always.
Mr. Brown, dis nou klaar, 'n nuwe begin wag daar. Mr. Brown,
And I do think I'd just like to leave now before I get overwhelmed. It's a bit much to take.
dis nou klaar, 'n nuwe begin wag daar.
Most of the changes in your life started while I was in Canada, and Mom said nothing to me for a long time, so I know little or nothing about why you made the choices you did. I can remember talking to you about what you were doing and asking you to try and get some help. I can't begin to explain the resentment that I feel towards you because of the heartache and the stress you caused Mom. It seemed to us that the only time you made contact with Mom was when you wanted something, like money or taking care of your children. Did you not realize that the choices you made have affected all of us in many different ways? It just seemed to me that if Alec Brown was all right, then that was all that counted. I gather you started out with the intention of helping the underprivileged, but surely charity begins at home. If you didn't consider David and I, it didn't matter, but you had a mother who loved you dearly. During the time I lived in Cape Town, when we knew where you were, I can remember sending you birthday cards with my address and telephone number if you ever wanted to contact me. No response.
I never ever received a birthday card that I'm aware of. Well, that's her idea. She's welcome to it. Because her words to me at Christmas time was, if she knew that I had cared so much, she would have made a greater effort. And the letter doesn't carry the tone that her words to me carried, but it doesn't matter.
I think I missed him a lot. I still do. He was a part of our lives, and you don't just lose a part of your life and feel nothing. It happens. I know, but it's never nice. Excuse me.
Dear Lord, you know the difficulties that beset the school. You know the difficult time that the school is going in because of not getting a teacher in my place. And I ask you, Lord, to bless each one of the teachers and be in their hearts. Help them, each one, Lord, to carry out their tasks almost in a paranormal way, because that is what this community needs, Lord. We ask this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. En hy is regtig mensie. Kan jy sien hoe maak meneer hy is? I've always lived my life to the full, to what I could be allowed to live. And the problems and the troubles that came, you know, like being thrown off a train, I actually enjoyed it because I was a rebel. And I thought, well, good show. And then I just got on the next one. I didn't stop. I looked hard for a viable piece. I think people just couldn't take the fact that I was prepared to sacrifice my birthright. And I feel that I did the right thing. I don't feel I did wrong.
Nee, Alec Brown kon nie sy doel bereik nie. Ons kon dit nie raak sien.
Many of them probably regarded me as a liberal white, thinking that I was just doing this to try and pacify them or make them feel nice or whatever. But I did it to show the world that nothing will happen to a white person if he mixes freely with coloreds, freely with blacks.
Ja, ek moet maar opstaan en ek moet kyk ook laat die kind kan vroeg klaar wees, want hy is baie treurig soms iets in die oggend. En die mens bietjie baie hard en dan praat. So lekker. Moet ek maar opstaan en teken maak die pa om ook wakker.
Eindelijk toe hy in Springveld kom, toe het hy maar vir Candy. Maar toe moes hy vir Candy wegsteek, laat die ander wit mense nie weet nie. Hy gaan uit met 'n brein, 'n meisie.
But in 1995, when Candy came to live here, she came as my girlfriend. We stayed in the same place, and there was no point in lying. What would be the point?
Twee plekke wat ek van weet, waar hy gebly het. Ek het hom uitgegooi omdat hulle agtergekom het hy het 'n breinvrou.
How much are they? Yes, Candy was a grade 12 student at Kroonstad when I went to teach there. We met there, and then the friendship finally grew into a relationship. Not so much when she was at school, because obviously when she left school, then it began in earnest, and she went to Cape Town for a couple of months, and then when she came back from Cape Town, she came to live here.
To me, whether he was white or coloured, in terms of his classification, he was still my brother. And that was never going to change.
The relationship seems to be on the mend. It's going to take time. I mean, 30 odd years is a long time to be apart.
So if Alec had to walk through my front door right now, I would get up and give him a hug and welcome him into my house.
Dear goodbye. Ja. Ek het ingetrek op die 5de November. Maar jy weet, dit vat tyd om hulle reg te maak. En hy was maar 'n bietjie verwaarloos. Moet ek maar deurgaan. Dis maar waar ek gewoon elke oggend sit. Kyk ek die nuus en die weer veral. Do you think you're going to go to school or you're too sick? No, I can't decide for you, boy. You must tell me how sick you are.